If I was to hype up this video, I would say something along the lines of, don't want to be caught up in the hype, watch this video on hype. My name is Gemma Milne. I'm a technology and science writer and researcher, and specifically I'm a lecturer in technology and innovation management at the University of Glasgow. I would define hype to someone that hasn't come across this term before. It's a way for people to be able to express excitement about something or express wanting to kind of get people excited about a thing, or feel strong feelings about a thing. The most standard example that's used when we talk about hype is to do with AI. It has various different moments through history where people have either been really excited about it or really fearful or both. In previous times, there's been a lot of hype around things like Web3 or cryptocurrencies, maybe around nanotechnology for a short time. That hype has kind of died down. Things like virtual reality technology has various different peaks and troughs of hype over time. So I suppose it's any kind of science technology that I guess makes it into the public conversation, and that public conversation is quite charged with various different kinds of emotions. That tends to be when we start thinking about what is that hype, where does it come from, and why. There's a role for all of us in that. I think for people who are consuming information, it's about not taking things at face value and not only relying on your emotions in response to something that you read. So I think we all have a responsibility ourselves to be more media literate and to make sure that we're asking a few more questions to make sure we don't get caught up in various different forms of hype. But for people who are creating hype, and I guess many people have to these days, we live in a so-called attention economy, it's a really difficult balance because on one hand, hype is used because it helps simplify and it helps get messages across really easily and quickly. But the downside is if the messages are misinterpreted, this is when we end up with misinformation or unfair information. So I always say for people to focus on telling system stories, structural stories, instead of overly simplistic stories, and also to be really clear about the difference between what's the vision that you're talking about versus the reality of what's actually happening, and making that quite clear in your messaging. I try and tell much broader stories that include the politics of what's happening, the economics, the social impacts, and so on and so forth. And I think when you start asking those kind of questions, you start uncovering different ideas, different stories, sometimes far more interesting stories than this science is going to save the world, which is a common story that's used to hype up science technology. A bit of a time where most people are quite hype literate. People are annoyed about hype. They don't want to see science and tech hype. They don't want to have another headline telling us AI is going to steal your jobs or whatever. We want more context and more depth. There's a reality around hype, I don't think necessarily being quite as impactful at the moment as perhaps it used to be, because I feel that there's this sense of more critical viewing of narratives that are coming out of science and technology. And almost if you over-rely on hype, that discredits you, right? So if you're saying, we want to investigate this chemical because we think it can be the next drug for cancer, whatnot, that might have worked in previous times, but I think now there's a far more critical eye to these kinds of narratives, and I think funders and citizens alike are looking for more context, looking for more detail, and they don't want to be fooled. They don't want to be caught up in hype. So I think it's about being more intelligent about saying, this is what we're doing, this is why it's important, this is the challenge, this is how far we still have to go to do the thing, but this is why we need whatever money, support, right now in order to ultimately get us there. I think it's just not about overclaiming, it's about being practical, being honest. Yeah, so hype has got a lot of power when used well, and by well I mean effectively. I don't necessarily mean well as in good. So when we talk about, I guess, the ideological entrepreneur and this idea of how hype is then attached to ideology, well, I mean, for that work specifically, it's about venture creation, but you know, hype is often very closely aligned with ideology because you're saying a message about what you think the future will be. This technology is going to do this, or this world is what we should have. You know, it's very aligned to a politics of the next and what you think should exist in the world and how the world should be. So the Hype Studies Conference, it's the very first one, and it's been amazing. I'm in a fortunate position that I have been to conferences, lots of conferences outside academia as well as conferences inside academia. And I think what's been so incredible about this conference is it hasn't stuck to any particular format. They've tried loads of different things, from workshops to art installations to kind of traditional academic presentations. They massively focused on the social element. There was a lot of really nice opportunities to connect with people, which ultimately is how really good, particularly social research, is done. And genuinely, there was just a real kind of, hypey newness, excitement about it. A lot of ECRs involved. It felt fresh, and I think there was a real energy to this conference, and I'm really excited to see what they do next.